It all started on a quiet morning in my neighborhood, the kind where nothing seems out of place. I had lived there for years, tending to my yard, chatting with neighbors, and quietly enjoying my little piece of the world. But one day, everything changed. I received a thick envelope stamped with the official seal of the HOA. My heart sank. HOA letters were never good news. I tore it open and skimmed through the text, barely able to process what I was reading. The association claimed that my property lines were incorrectly documented and that a portion of my land actually belonged to them, or worse, to a communal neighborhood space. Their demand was simple. Either I give up a large portion of my yard or face a lawsuit. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Surely they were confusing my property with someone else's. But as I read further, the letter became threatening. The HOA insisted that their board had the authority to correct property lines without my consent. My jaw dropped. This wasn't just a dispute over a fence or landscaping. It was about me potentially losing part of my home, the land I had inherited and worked so hard to maintain. I called a lawyer immediately. He listened carefully as I explained the situation. "Talha, you need to get a surveyor to document your property boundaries, and we'll prepare a case," he advised. But deep down, I knew this was going to be more than a simple property dispute. This HOA had power, influence, and a history of intimidating homeowners. I had to tread carefully, but I also knew I couldn't back down. Within a week, a surveyor came to my property. As he walked the boundaries, measuring every corner and marking the land meticulously, my anxiety grew. The HOA had claimed that their maps were correct, but I had my own documents, deeds, tax records, and historical maps that proved my ownership. Every stake the surveyor placed seemed like a small victory, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that this battle was about to get ugly. I emailed the HOA to present the survey results, hoping for a peaceful resolution. Instead, their response was dismissive and condescending. They escalated the matter to their legal team and hinted at taking me to court. I realized then that this wasn't just about land, it was about power, control, and sending a message that no one could challenge them. I decided I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. I prepared myself mentally for the legal fight ahead, not knowing what the outcome would be. Little did I know the story was about to take a shocking twist, one that would not only defend my land, but also change the future of the entire neighborhood. The courtroom smelled of polished wood, faint coffee, and the tension that only legal battles can bring. I had never imagined that a simple dispute over my yard would escalate into a full-blown court case, drawing the attention of my entire neighborhood. On one side, the HOA's attorneys looked confident, armed with maps, reports, and a thick binder of alleged evidence. On the other, I had my lawyer, my surveyor's meticulous notes, and a collection of documents proving my rightful ownership. But honestly, it felt like David versus Goliath. The first hearing was more about procedure than substance. The judge, a stern woman with decades of experience, listened as both sides laid out preliminary arguments. The HOA tried to assert that they had the authority to reassign property lines under some obscure clause buried deep in the neighborhood's bylaws. My lawyer countered by emphasizing that no homeowner could be stripped of property without due process and clear evidence. I watched the exchange with a mix of anxiety and determination, praying the judge would see through the HOA's intimidation tactics. As the weeks went by, more hearings followed. Each session revealed shocking details about the HOA's methods. They had been quietly pressuring other homeowners to sign agreements ceding parts of their land, creating maps that conveniently proved their claims. It was like uncovering a hidden scheme that spanned years. I realized that this fight wasn't just about my property. It was about exposing a system designed to bully and manipulate residents. During one particularly intense session, the judge asked me to present my evidence. I nervously walked to the stand, holding my maps and deeds, explaining every historical detail, every surveyor's measurement. I could feel the courtroom holding its breath. Then my surveyor stepped forward, carefully explaining the boundaries, pointing to markers that clearly established my ownership. The HOA attorneys tried to interrupt, claiming technicalities, but the judge was patient yet firm. She asked pointed questions that gradually revealed the weaknesses in the HOA's claims. By the time the hearing adjourned, whispers filled the hallway. People were speculating. Could it be possible that the HOA's map manipulation might backfire? I didn't dare hope too much. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a flicker of confidence was growing. This fight was bigger than I had imagined, but it also had the potential to change everything for not just me, but the entire neighborhood. Little did I know, the next hearing would bring a revelation, so shocking that it would leave the courtroom stunned and set. The stage for an outcome nobody could have predicted. The next court date arrived, and the tension in the courtroom was palpable. I had spent sleepless nights going over every document, every survey, and every piece of evidence. My lawyer assured me we were ready, but nothing could fully prepare me for what was about to unfold. As the judge called the case to order, the HOA's attorneys sat with confident smirks, convinced that they had the upper hand. But the atmosphere was different this time. Something felt off. Early in the proceedings, the judge asked a series of unexpected questions that caught everyone off guard. She inquired about the original land plots, the subdivision's history, and even the deeds from decades ago. The HOA attorneys fumbled, clearly unprepared, to answer questions that reached beyond their carefully curated maps. My lawyer seized the moment, presenting historical maps and official records that traced the property lines long before the HOA even existed. Then came the moment that changed everything. The judge leaned forward and asked if there were any other homeowners who might be affected by these claims. My lawyer explained that our research indicated the HOA had attempted to reassign plots across multiple properties. Suddenly, the case wasn't just about me. It was about an entire neighborhood that had unknowingly been part of a scheme. The judge's eyes narrowed as she flipped through the records. "Are you telling me," she asked the HOA attorney sharply, "that you have been operating under false assumptions for years, potentially affecting every single homeowner here?" The courtroom gasped. The HOA attorney sputtered, unable to respond coherently. Evidence that had been buried in files and ignored for years was now laid bare. Historic deeds, land surveys, and municipal records all confirmed that the HOA's claims were baseless. Every document pointed to the same conclusion. The land I owned was rightfully mine, and their so-called neighborhood adjustments had no legal standing. It was surreal to watch the shift in energy. Homeowners who had been quietly observing began whispering excitedly to one another. Some were already imagining what this revelation could mean for their own properties. The judge, visibly shocked, set a date for the final ruling, promising that it would not be ordinary. Even the HOA board members seemed unsettled, realizing that their confidence had been completely dismantled. As we left the courtroom, I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. I had known I owned the land, but seeing the law affirm it in such a dramatic way was overwhelming. I couldn't help but think about the upcoming decision and the ripple effects it could have. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future where this neighborhood was free from the shadow of the HOA's manipulations. Little did I know the judge's final ruling would go beyond anything I or anyone else could have anticipated. The day of the final ruling arrived, and the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Neighbors, curious residents, and even a few local reporters had gathered, sensing that this case was far from ordinary. I sat in the front row, my hands clasped tightly, trying to steady the mix of excitement and anxiety that churned inside me. The HOA board members, on the other hand, appeared tense and uneasy, their usual arrogance replaced with a hint of fear. The judge entered, and the room immediately fell silent. She began by summarizing the case, detailing the HOA's claims, and highlighting the overwhelming evidence presented in my favor. Her voice was calm, yet carried a weight that made everyone lean forward in their seats. Then she paused, looked directly at the HOA attorneys, and said something that made the room collectively hold its breath. After reviewing all evidence, deeds, and historical records, it is clear that the claims made by the HOA are without legal merit. However, given the extent of the errors and mismanagement, I am issuing a ruling that goes beyond a simple restitution. This court finds that the boundaries of this property are not only valid for the plaintiff, but that, due to the HOA's extensive attempts to manipulate property lines, the plaintiff holds rightful ownership over the areas in question, including those that were previously considered part of the neighborhood. A stunned silence filled the room. I blinked in disbelief, unsure if I had heard her correctly. My lawyer squeezed my shoulder, his expression a mix of shock and satisfaction. The judge continued, explaining that the ruling effectively recognized my ownership of not just the disputed land, but, in a historic twist, extended my property rights over areas the HOA had claimed across multiple parcels in the neighborhood. Gasps echoed throughout the courtroom. HOA board members turned pale, murmuring among themselves, while neighbors stared at me in astonishment. Some even whispered that this was unprecedented, a single homeowner being granted ownership over such a vast area due to the HOA's misconduct. The judge's rationale was clear. The HOA had overstepped its authority, and justice required a ruling that not only corrected the wrongdoing, but also sent a message that no governing body could exploit homeowners. As the ruling was officially recorded, I felt a wave of relief and vindication wash over me. Years of stress, legal battles, and sleepless nights culminated in a victory that was beyond my wildest expectations. Yet alongside the elation, a sense of responsibility settled in. Owning such a large portion of the neighborhood meant I now had a role in reshaping the community, ensuring fairness and preventing abuses like the ones I had endured. Walking out of the courtroom, I could hear neighbors discussing the outcome, many approaching me to express awe and gratitude. The battle was over. But the story of how a single homeowner stood up to an overreaching, the news of the judge's ruling spread like wildfire. Within days, neighbors began visiting my property, some out of curiosity, others out of relief. Many whispered about how the HOA had overreached and how their own properties might have been impacted. But beyond the shock and awe, I realized the ruling had created an opportunity, a chance to rebuild trust, fairness, and transparency in a neighborhood that had long been controlled by fear and intimidation. The HOA, predictably, was furious. Board members met behind closed doors debating whether to appeal, but the judge had left little room for maneuver. Their bylaws, their claims, their manipulations all had been exposed and nullified. Even if they tried to fight it, public opinion and legal precedent were now firmly on my side. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very organization that had tried to strip me of my land had, through its arrogance, handed me unprecedented control over the neighborhood. At first, managing this newfound responsibility was overwhelming. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I was the custodian of vast portions of the community. I met with neighbors, listened to their concerns, and discussed ways to ensure the neighborhood could operate fairly without overreach. Slowly, a plan emerged, a cooperative model, where homeowners had real input, transparency was guaranteed, and no one could wield power to intimidate or manipulate. As the months passed, the transformation was visible. The once tense atmosphere softened. Community events, block parties, and collaborative projects flourished. Neighbors who had once avoided confrontation now felt empowered. And while the HOA still existed in name, its influence had been curtailed. The ruling had changed not only my life, but the lives of everyone in the neighborhood, creating a culture of accountability and mutual respect. Even more personal victories came in unexpected ways. Children played freely in yards that had once been disputed. Families planted gardens where legal battles had once loomed, and friendships grew stronger. I walked through the neighborhood, seeing people smile and wave, knowing that the ruling had not just preserved my land, but restored a sense of community that had been eroded by fear and mismanagement. Looking back, it's still surreal to think about how it all began. A single letter from the HOA, threatening my home. That moment sparked a legal battle that shook the neighborhood to its core, revealed systemic corruption, and ultimately led to a ruling that was unprecedented in scope. The fight was hard, stressful, and at times seemed impossible. But in the end, standing up for what was right didn't just protect my land. It created a legacy of justice and fairness for generations to come. From that day forward, I wasn't just a homeowner. I was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that sometimes one determined person can change everything.